people think about Rome's emperors, many imagine powerful leaders, grand battles, or magnificent monuments. But there is another side to Rome's history that is much darker, and few stories reveal it better than what took place on the private island of Emperor Tiberius. History remembers him not only as a ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the world, but also as a man who used isolation and secrecy to create a personal world of cruelty. On the island of Capri, Tiberius built an empire of fear, where enslaved youth and helpless victims were forced into lives so terrifying that even ancient writers struggled to describe it without horror. Tiberius was not Rome's first emperor. He inherited the throne from Augustus, who had created stability and glory for the Roman Empire. But Tiberius was different. He was withdrawn, suspicious, and increasingly paranoid. Over time, he grew tired of Rome itself. The Senate, the crowds, and the endless demands of leadership weighed on him. Seeking escape, he retreated to the island of Capri, a place surrounded by cliffs where the sea itself became a wall that kept outsiders away and captives trapped inside. What happened on that island shocked Rome, but the details that have survived reveal a chilling picture of absolute power without restraint. Life on Capri for Tiberius was hidden from ordinary citizens. Only the emperor, his guards, his servants, and his captives knew what took place there. Ancient sources describe how Tiberius surrounded himself with luxury, but at the center of that luxury was terror. Enslaved boys and girls, many taken from conquered territories, were brought to Capri for the sole purpose of serving the emperor's darkest desires. They were not guests, not companions, and not equals. They were property. Their lives had no value beyond what amusement they provided. Tiberius's cruelty toward youth became legendary in Roman history. Writers recorded that children were forced into degrading acts, trained not for education or honor, but for humiliation. Some were even used as living playthings, stripped of all dignity, their childhood stolen in ways too disturbing for polite history to explain. The emperor turned innocence into entertainment, and the island into a prison where escape was impossible. Capri became a paradise for one man and a nightmare for those enslaved under him. The cliffs of the island added to the terror. Ancient accounts suggest that when Tiberius grew tired of someone, he did not simply release them. He ordered them thrown from the cliffs into the sea. Guards ensured that anyone who displeased him or knew too much about the horrors of the island never left alive. Imagine being a young captive, knowing that at any moment your life could end with a silent order from the emperor. Your body dashed against the rocks below, erased from history without mercy. But Tiberius did not limit his cruelty to the youth alone. Capri became a place where punishments of all kinds were inflicted. Servants who made mistakes were whipped or tortured. Prisoners brought from Rome were executed in creative ways, meant to entertain the emperor's sick imagination. Some were forced to endure slow deaths, while others were used in humiliating performances designed only to amuse their captor. The island became a stage where fear was constant and survival depended entirely on the shifting moods of one man. This isolation allowed Tiberius to act without restraint. In Rome, even emperors had to consider appearances. Senators could criticize, the people could riot, and the image of the ruler mattered. But on Capri, none of those checks existed. There was no senate, no mob, no rival. The emperor was free to indulge his cruelty in private, hidden from the judgment of the city. The only witnesses were the enslaved youth and attendants who had no voice, no power, and no hope. The most disturbing part of this story is how Rome tolerated it. Rumors spread of what happened on Capri, but few dared to challenge the emperor directly. Some historians even suggest that the Senate preferred Tiberius' retreat because it kept him away from daily politics. The cost was silence in the face of horror. As long as the empire remained stable and the emperor ruled from afar, the suffering of those on Capri was ignored. In this sense, The cruelty was not only Tiberius' personal darkness, it was also the empire's shame, a reminder of how absolute power could twist morality beyond recognition. Imagine the psychological terror for the enslaved youth on the island. They were taken from their homes, separated from families, stripped of identity, and forced into the service of a man who saw them as tools of entertainment. They had no chance of rescue, no chance of appeal, and no future. The island itself was their prison, the cliffs their walls, and the emperor their judge, master, and executioner. Every day was a gamble for survival, and every night was filled with fear of what new demand would be forced upon them. It is important to understand that Tiberius was not simply a private man indulging in cruelty. He was the ruler of the Roman Empire, the most powerful man of his time. His decisions shaped the lives of millions, his armies conquered nations, and his decrees changed history. And yet, in the isolation of Capri, he used that same absolute authority not to govern wisely, but to indulge in terror. His rule became a mirror of his private life, suspicious, brutal, and marked by fear. Ancient historians like Suetonius and Tacitus recorded these stories, though some modern scholars debate how much may have been exaggerated. Yet, even if half the accounts are true, the picture is horrifying enough. Whether every detail is accurate or not, the reputation of Tiberius' Island of Terror endured for centuries. Romans remembered Capri not as a paradise of beauty, but as a place where innocence was destroyed, cruelty was celebrated, and youth were sacrificed to satisfy the darkness of a single man. The lessons from Capri reach beyond one emperor. They reveal what happens when power becomes absolute and unchecked. On the mainland, emperors still faced resistance, gossip, or rebellion. On an island fortress, far from the eyes of the people, power became limitless. And in the hands of someone like Tiberius, limitless power created limitless suffering. Capri became the perfect example of how secrecy and isolation can turn authority into tyranny. What makes this story even more disturbing is the silence of history's victims. The enslaved youth who lived and died on that island left no records, no testimonies, and no voices. Their experiences survive only through the accounts of others, often shaped by politics or bias. We will never know their names, their fears, or their final thoughts. They were erased by history, just as they were erased by the cliffs of Capri. The tragedy is not only in what they suffered, but in how completely they were forgotten. And yet, the ruins of Tiberius' villas still stand on Capri today. Tourists visit the remains of his palace, admire the views, and marvel at the engineering. Few think about what those walls witnessed. Few pause to imagine the screams that once echoed against the cliffs, or the lives that ended beneath the waves. The stones remember, even if history prefers to forget. Tiberius ruled Rome for over 2 decades, but his retreat to Capri defined his legacy. He became a symbol of cruelty hidden behind power, a man whose name was forever linked to terror. Rome endured after his death, but the stories of his island continued to haunt the empire's memory. They reminded Romans that their rulers were not gods, but men, and that men with unchecked power could sink to unimaginable depths of inhumanity. The story of Tiberius' Island of Terror is more than just a tale of one emperor's darkness. It is a warning about what happens when cruelty is protected by silence, when the most vulnerable are placed at the mercy of the most powerful, and when fear becomes the foundation of authority. The enslaved youth of Capri were not soldiers, not criminals, not rebels. They were children and captives, caught in the grip of a system that valued power above humanity. Their suffering should not be remembered as a distant scandal, but as a timeless reminder of what unchecked power can create. History often celebrates Rome for its roads, its laws, and its culture. But hidden within that history are stories like Capri, where human suffering was silenced and ignored. To understand Rome fully, we must confront both its brilliance and its cruelty. Capri was not only an island of beauty. Under Tiberius, it was an island of terror, and the youth who lived and died there remain among history's most forgotten victims.